All right, so thank you so much for joining us today. This is not, you can't even see the title of it. That's okay. Our slide deck had the wrong title on it, but that's okay. The title of this workshop is Access to Capital, really targeting the realities of... No, it has the right title. Okay, there we go. Access to Capital, now it's right. It's really about how do startups access funding to get their businesses off the ground and hopefully to the next level. My name is Andy Gold. I'm from Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, Florida, and I'm excited to be here at Wake Tech Community College this week as part of NACCE's grand opening and celebration of National Entrepreneurship Week. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Cherith Roberson. I'm the director of the Small Business Center here at Wake Tech. We are headquartered here at our Western Wake campus, and we are thrilled to have NACCE coming on board with their headquarters here at Western Wake too. So welcome to our neighbors, and thanks for being here for this discussion today.
So we've been hard at work for a couple of months working on this presentation.
We can tell.
We have. So we're going to start out by first doing a little activity we use in some of our classes and workshops through an app called Kahoot. I don't know if anyone ever used Kahoot? Okay. So what you'll do is you'll take your phone out if you have a phone with you. If not, you'll share with somebody that does. And you'll go to Kahoot.it on your phone.
I pulled it up, yep.
.it, and it'll prompt you for a game pin number, and you'll type in that number, and then we'll get the ball rolling on how to use Kahoot. So Kahoot.it in your web browser, and then you type in a name after you type in the code, and your name will start popping up in here as soon as you do that.
Kahoot video game?
Just Kahoot.it. Like instead of just go on, here can help you if you need help. I see one player is in.
We've got one.
Yep. Yep, the nickname. Just create what you can call yourself by your own name, or if you don't want to be known.
It looks like we've got...
Okay, there we go.
We've got
Becky's
four. Here
in,
we go.
Jean's in.
Great.
There we go. Lady Shark, I love it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 of us in here. We're at 7 right now. So we'll give you another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. Yeah, web people, get on Kahoot.it. All right, so we're going to get started. So you can press this. Anyone want a last minute to log in? Anyone need more time?
It looks like we have is that a person as well? The sun.
I wanted to see if the symbol would work.
It worked.
Okay.
So we have 9 people. Okay, cool.
All right, so what's going to happen is we're going to start the game. You're going to be prompted with a question and then 4 answer choices. On your phone, it's going to show you 4 color options that align with the answer choices, and you're going to try to pick the correct answer. Whoever gets it correct gets points. If you answer it faster, you get more points than somebody else. So let's get started. Oh, here we go. Percentage of new businesses that start with less than $5,000. You have 5 seconds left. This is very fast. Too bad, can't do it. Okay, so the correct answer is 33% of all new businesses start with less than $5,000, and we'll talk about why that's important in a short while.
It looks like...
So nobody got that right. We're off to a good start.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Here we go. Tony is in the lead just because of some reason. I don't really know why. Okay, fastest. He guessed wrong the fastest. Okay.
All right, here we go to the next one.
The financial movement of cash flowing in and out of a business is called what?
Ten seconds left.
I don't know. It must be muted. It must be muted.
Where did Jeff go?
It must be muted. I don't know.
All right.
Excellent.
Good
The
job.
whole entire room got that right.
All right.
Jean in the lead.
So So he's the first one to answer.
Yeah.
All right.
Percentage of businesses that fail within 5 years. This is data from the Small Business Administration. Yes, 50% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. Gene, knocking it out of the park. Percentage of new businesses within the first year that successfully access venture capital. Yeah, venture capital, yeah, the fancy capital. Got it, all 8 people are in, yep. Yes, 0.05%. That's incredibly low.
Yep.
So very, very few businesses are able to even tap into that initially.
So it's irrelevant.
You got it. Well said, my man.
All right.
Gene's still in the lead. He's hanging tough. Rent, lease payments, and insurance are all examples of yes. Those are all examples of fixed expenses. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you're right. That's right.
There's actually shapes, though.
Oh, there's shapes. Yeah, there's shapes. Yes.
The shapes are small.
Thank you for that, Beth. You bailed me out there. The number one reason businesses fail. Ran out of cash, not the right team, no market need, lack of experience. No market need. No market need. Cash is second, but no market need if there's no demand for whatever it is you're proposing to sell. You're not going to be in business very long.
Gene's still in the lead.
All right, we have 2 more left, or 3 more. Percentages of new businesses that bootstrap through personal funds. Okay, 57% bootstrap. But the next slide will probably answer your concerns. The percentage of new businesses that fund their business through bootstrapping and friends and family.
Oh, they have such a tricky answer to
I know.
Oh, I don't know what to put.
Well, guess. You have 8 seconds.
I got it right.
95%. So that tells us a lot. 95% of all new businesses fund the initial startup that way. All right, I think we have 2 more or 1 more left. One
this
more.
is
This
the
is
last?
it. Percentage of new business that qualify for a bank loan, a traditional bank loan, brand new business. We have 4%, 5.26%, 0.75%, or 1.43%. These are very precise numbers. 1.43% is the correct answer. Who got that right? Who answered that? Oh, 2? Wow, very good. Excellent.
Good
All right, so
method.
let's see who won. Hit next. It's very dramatic. Chip came in third. Yay, Chip! Beth Curley at second, and first place, is it Gene? Gene! All right, Gene, you're going to win a paper airplane when we're done here. I'm going to make one out of this and fly it over to you. All right, so that's a good activity to start out with. We hope in these types of presentations we also give you tools to use in your own workshops, classrooms, and so on that can help to get students engaged in what can be somewhat of a scary and monotonous topic, finance, and how to go about financing your business. So we went through the Kahoot, so Let me grab this and just cycle through a couple of these. We're going to go through some financial management data similar to what we learned about in Kahoot. Whoops.
A little sensitive
there we go.
There we go.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
All right, so here's data. You want to talk about this one first?
Sure.
Okay.
So this study was done by Inc. magazine, and it found that, as you can see, 2.7 million startups found that the ideal age to start a business it's a little bit higher than you might think. So can you guys give me a range of 40 and under? How many of you think that the age was 40 and under? One? Couple? Okay. Everybody else thinks 40 and older?
Okay.
All right.
So, you want to cover this? I'll cover this one. So 57% of small business owners today are over 50 years of age. And really the data on age skews older, generally speaking, which helps us a lot, especially within the community college network, to leverage an advantage that we have over traditional four-year institutions. Because of the age diversity of community colleges, we typically have an older demographic student body. I think that positions NACCE and community college members to really accelerate small business enterprising, because we organically already have the right type of demographic within our own institutions.
So here you can see, and we kind of talked about this earlier, the percentage of new businesses that started with less than $5,000, 33%. A lot of times folks come to the Small Business Center and think that they need a $25,000, $30,000, $50,000, $150,000 loan. But something that we looked at and spoke to earlier with the Kahoot activity is proving a market need for the business. So being able to do that with a small amount of capital, with around $5,000, and really proving that there's a market and a need for the business can make such a difference for whether or not they're successful, and then build up to further capital.
And 65% of people surveyed who are actually in business self-report that a lack of confidence in having enough money, understanding finance in any practical or meaningful way is a huge concern of theirs. And that's, again, another opportunity for community colleges to kind of fill that void. This is a summary of the data we showed in the Kahoot activity. It just shows it to you in a pie chart. So you can see that bootstrapping through personal savings and credit, and in some cases drawing down of retirement funds and friends and family, represent well over 90% of all startup capital for most businesses nowadays, with some other opportunities sprinkled in between. The community college system has unique funding opportunities for students that are at that point. We're fortunate to be part of a unique pilot program through the Everyday Entrepreneur Venture Fund that has 4 community colleges participating right now. Each of them received an initial gift of $250,000. And the results of that 1.5 year or so pilot thus far have been incredibly powerful, and we've seen the power of how much a little bit of money can go to really be a catalyst for entrepreneurial and small business enterprising. So this slide here is going to cover some of the different ways that people can access funding. So do you want to pick one or two? Or?
Yeah, I think that some of the most popular common questions that we often see are around business pitch competitions and grants. We get a lot of questions around, what opportunities do I have to win money? So for grants or business pitch competitions, and it's really easy to overlook the simple ones of personal funds for bootstrapping or friends and family, which really should be the foundational go-to. But it's easy to jump in. There's a lot of myths out there around grant funding specifically, and how easy it is to access.
The other thing is with pitch competitions, we were talking about this earlier, it can be a real mixed bag, pitch competitions, because they can yield very, very poor results. You know, on the one hand, some people that were very nervous about present, and they don't place in first, second, or third, and they feel totally deflated and demoralized because they're kind of new to that type of rejection. But then on the flip side, some people who win these pitch competitions have horrific ideas, but they think they're onto something because they won a pitch competition, and it could be so random what has caused them to win the pitch competition. It could be that the judges just understood what that person was saying, or they were sleeping while the other presenters were going. There's so many factors that can come into play to mislead people one way or another. So we try not to really overemphasize pitch competitions too much. But I did want to mention a couple of alternative forms of funding that oftentimes are not focused in on. Although I will say, if you're very good at pitching and you enter a lot of pitch competitions, you can scrape together $15,000, $10,000, $20,000 pretty quickly if you're proficient at presenting your business idea. And that can be enough, as we saw from the previous slides, to really jumpstart a business and have the capital that's necessary. Crowdfunding, of course, not so new anymore, but has taken hold, and it offers a lot of different opportunities for early stage entrepreneurs to tap into various forms of funding, whether it be peer-to-peer lending, different crowdfunding platforms, now with equity crowdfunding as well. But there are a lot of cool peer-to-peer lending platforms that are out there where there are just people that want to lend businesses that are compelling and are addressing some kind of community challenge by providing funding to them at little to no cost in terms of interest. So that's an often overlooked avenue. Do you want to talk about bank loans or?
Sure. I mean, and before I jump into bank loans, one thing I also wanted to share about crowdfunding, that a lot of small businesses have fallen into the idea that crowdfunding is kind of pushing a button. You tell your story, it goes viral on Facebook or social media, and all of a sudden you've reached your crowdfunding goals. And the most successful crowdfunding campaigns are ones where they're really working and putting marketing into it ahead of time and building up the story, making sure that their current clients are ambassadors for their brand. So it is a significant amount of work typically to have a successful crowdfunding campaign, but it can really make a difference. For small business and conventional loans, you have some of the typical barriers which may make people seek grants or business pitch competitions, in that you're looking at personal credit, you're looking at personal equity, and your ability to be financed. So some of those common requirements can be a barrier to a lot of folks who want to start a small business. So being able to have that conversation around, you don't need as much money, possibly, depending on what business you want to start, to prove that you might have an idea or to start gaining customers can be really powerful.
And if you fall into the 1.4% of new businesses that actually qualify for a bank loan, a traditional bank loan, you're going to have to sign a personal guarantee. And if you sign a personal guarantee, you're ostensibly converting a business loan into a personal loan, holding you fully liable for the high probability of failure for most businesses, as we illustrated in that previous slide. So it's best, in my opinion, to initially avoid conventional bank lending, even if it's accessible to you, because the probabilities of you not succeeding early on are relatively high, and then you'd be on the hook to, of course, have to repay this loan, and that can really place you in a precarious situation financially with you and your family. Angel investors, venture capital, and private equity get a lot of attention because of the sexy side of entrepreneurship with all of these high growth hockey stick graph type of business models. There are some nuanced differences between angel investors and venture capitalists. Angel investors typically, of course, have smaller amounts of money that they'll invest. They're seeking a lower return on that investment than, say, venture capitalists or private equity firms. But the one unique thing about angel investors is they typically will gear their attention toward things that they believe in. So they're believers in the cause of whatever that business is. Yes, there's a financial incentive for them to invest, but they're typically people that want to help and nurture those founders along and then pass them off to other larger investors once they get past that particular round. Venture capitalists and private, especially venture capitalists, if you're ever in that situation, they basically are going to want to move into your house and take over control of what it is that you've created. So a lot of people are enticed by that type of fundraising. Very, very difficult to get it. And even if you do get it, you have to be prepared for what the potential downside is of having someone kind of take you off course a little bit. This was from Inc. 500, which are the 500 fastest growing companies in the United States. And we can see here that, you know, roughly 35 to 40% of Inc. 500 companies started with less than $10,000. That's often a surprising data point for a lot of people because these are not your typical like single shingle small business owner that's opening a food truck. These are companies that are growing relatively quickly but started with very, very little capital. So one of the things we like to do with our students is to break down that myth that you need a lot of money to get a business off the ground. We've seen through the benefits of the Everyday Entrepreneur Venture Fund and other initiatives we're involved with that so little can do so much. And this is a great example of that.
Something that the Kahoot activity touched on earlier, the percentage of businesses that fail because of poor cash flow management, just understanding that just because I get a contract or just because I have sales doesn't mean that I can pay my bills or keep the lights on. The cash flow has to be coming into my business before it goes out, or I have to have it in the bank before it goes out. So I use the analogy of waves coming in and going out. Cash coming in and going out, I need to always have something in my bank account in order to be able to plan ahead and understand what the requirements are in order to be cash flow positive. So especially for businesses who are doing long-term contracts where they're not going to get paid for a while, that's one thing that can really be detrimental and cause them to lose their business.
Cash flow is definitely, in my opinion, the lifeblood of any business enterprise. I think it's the most important thing to focus on. And unfortunately, a lot of people that are, I'll just call them novice entrepreneurs, people that are new to starting businesses, don't even do a basic thing that would help them greatly with cash flow, which is to just simply create a startup budget to realistically guesstimate how much capital do I think I need over the first 6 months of operating this business, assuming I don't get a critical mass of customers doing business with me. So I can focus over that 6-month period of time on getting customers, not worrying about losing money and what did I get myself into and now I've drained my savings. And once you get into that situation where you're suffocated by the financial duress of not making money early on in a business, which of course is really common, it can take you off course and really accelerate the failure of that business. 79% of small businesses that fail cite that they started with too little cash, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So again, education plays a critical role, whether it be through an SBDC, whether it be through traditional college credit classes, workshops you might attend. To just learn that, to know that you should at least forecast and line up sufficient capital to get you through those critical months before you might turn cash flow positive, could be a game changer and lifesaver for many, many people. And it might prevent you from starting because you might realize, gosh, there's no way I can get $15,000 together to get this business off the ground. So it's better to not start the business in that example or distribute the risk you can't take yourself among partners than to start something and place yourself in a really bad situation. All right, so some things to consider before you start. And this will help you a lot in managing and understanding your financial management needs. So there's essentially two sides to entrepreneurship. On the left-hand side of the screen are small to medium-sized enterprises, and on the right side are the sexy, innovation-driven enterprises. And you can see that SMEs have a much faster pathway toward becoming cash flow positive and profitability, and eventually it levels out after a period of time. Whereas the mostly tech startups that are innovation-driven enterprises are losing money for a long period of time because they're investing it in the development of the technology, in acquiring customers. It can be a huge cash burn venture. So to not know which one of these two you are at the outset, of course, is a terrible mistake. And it's really important that you consider that when you start, because each type of business model will have different cash needs. So these are some questions that I'm sure you talk to your clients about, and I know we tell our students, like if you can't answer these questions before even thinking about money or thinking about starting a business, then you just simply shouldn't even go into business.
Yeah.
So I'll take the first one, and then maybe if you want to take the second one, is you have to think about, what am I prepared to lose by starting this business? Not how big can it get, how fast can it grow, when can I get my island that I'll own with people serving me cocktails and drinks, but to think first, what am I prepared to lose by starting this business? Saras Sarasvathy, who will be spoken about in the next workshop, defines this as affordable loss. Like, how much are you willing to lose by starting this business? And if what you're prepared to lose is less than what's required, well, I'll ask all of you in the room right now, what are your options at that point? If, let's say, you need $20,000 to get the thing started, but you're only prepared to lose $5,000, what options do you have to get the business started, if any? That wasn't a rhetorical question. We're in a room, for those of you who are watching online, we're in a room with like very experienced entrepreneurs. So I asked what I thought was a relatively easy question, and like crickets, like no one's raising their hand. Okay, so what is the answer? What is the answer?
Enter 10 pitch contests and take all the money.
Excellent. Okay, so there you go.
If you're a good storyteller and an extrovert, right?
Yeah.
You have to have all the things lined
Or
up.
find, yes.
I would say get other investors.
Get other investors if you can. Like, if you can, right? Get other investors. Or just don't do it.
Yeah,
like,
scrap the whole thing.
Scrap the whole thing.
Ask your family and friends.
Ask your family and friends. There you go. All right, so the second one's really important. You want to speak to that one?
Yeah, so this is something that we... it's the first part of the Lean Canvas business model. What problem am I solving? And it's critical that a small business or entrepreneur can answer this question because it plays out into every other part of their business model. So we really like to delve into what problem am I solving and really understanding the problem. So not thinking, oh, well, I have a problem where this problem exists because I've observed this one behavior at this specific time, or because it's annoying to me, which is one of the things that a lot of people, experience is I want to tackle this problem because it's something that is annoying to me. So really proving that the problem exists and that other people also are experiencing the same problem. I listened to this podcast, How I Built This. Does anybody else like that podcast? Mm-hmm. Love that podcast. I don't know if you all heard the woman who founded Happy Baby Organics. And she created initially this frozen baby food that she put in the freezer aisle. And the mission of her business then, 20 years ago when she started it, and now, was to change the way that children eat in America. And she secured some funding. She got some investment. And within, I think she said 5 to 6 months of starting, she realized that parents weren't buying food in the frozen food section. So there were enough people buying her food to maintain her cash flow at a minimum level, but she knew it was not going to be sustainable for her business. So in order to achieve her mission and prove that she had a problem, or that there was a problem that she was solving, she needed to think about the problem that she was solving. So she started talking to parents again, understanding the problem in more detail, and ended up realizing that her products needed to be where all the other baby food products are, which is on the baby food aisle in supermarkets. And so, bless you. She was the first company that had baby food pouches. I'm sure that you've seen those now. They're everywhere. And she introduced the baby food pouch, and now her company is sold in Targets and grocery stores all across the U.S. But she had to really understand the problem and then be willing to pivot. So I like to use that example of, she thought she had a problem that she was solving. This fresh, accessible, healthy baby food for parents was not easily accessible. But she really had to understand that problem in full detail and where her customers were at, meeting them where they were at. So really understanding the problem, and then is it a painful one or simply an inconvenience? Because a lot of us are willing to be somewhat inconvenienced. So if we're willing to pay for it, I mean, Amazon has proved that we're willing to pay for convenience to a certain extent.
And this is where I think the types of questions you ask people become incredibly important. So here's just a quick thought experiment. Let's say I wanted to start a food truck business in downtown Raleigh. And my assumption is that there aren't very healthy options for people that want to eat from a food truck. So I want to open up an organic food truck in downtown Raleigh. So my assumption is, of course, that people care about the quality of the food that they ingest. So I would go out and I would ask people this question, but that would be a really bad question to ask, and I'll illustrate that right now. Raise your hand if you care about the quality of the food that you eat. Raise your hand if you care. Okay, so for those of you that can't see, 100% of the room said yes to that question. But yes/no questions early on can be really bad questions to ask because they don't measure how much people care about the quality of the food that they eat in that example. So you want to kind of mix your questions in with some other way of measuring the pain point that people are, is it really painful? So how much do you care about the quality of the food that you eat? So what would you say on a scale of 1 to 100? How much do you care? 1, not at all. 100, oh my God, I've got like a cage over my mouth. 70, okay. Chip?
50.
50. Stuart?
55.
55, okay. Karen?
52.5.
Okay. Gene?
Smart ass.
I love it.
67 and a quarter.
Okay, I love this. How about you, Katie?
80%.
Okay.
72 and 13/16.
All right, David? 70.
I say 90.
90. Beth?
I forget what the question was.
How much do you care about the quality of the food that you eat? 1, not at all. 100, greatly.
Oh, 90.
Okay, so maybe it's like a 67 in the room, something like that. That's useful information. And using a larger scale of 1 to 100 is good because if you say on a scale of 1 to 5, people will say I'm a 1, a 2, or 3, 4, or 5. When you spread it, you get more specific data points like you were all giving me, like 67.378275 and all that stuff. You get more precise data the larger the scale is. Once you know it's painful, you can then ask people what they do to kind of solve this problem. I think telling people what the solution is before hearing how they currently address the problem can be another mistake that people make. People have a tendency to think their idea is really good, and they're excited to tell people, oh, what do you think about this, my food truck? But it's way better to have people tell you what they want, and hopefully what they tell you is what you think they desire. And then are people willing to, of course, pay for the solution? This is true whether you're a for-profit or nonprofit. So if you're a nonprofit, are people willing to donate to your cause? Do you have some sort of demonstrated success or solution to a community problem that would yield donations or grants coming your way? And if you can't demonstrate any of these things, or really all of those things, I think it makes it a much heavier lift to A, get capital, and B, have a business that can flourish.
One thing I want to mention about asking these questions that I found is that more and more people go to social media to ask the question, and their friends and family answer the question to be kind, and they want to tell the person asking what they want to hear. I mean, I want to be a supportive friend on Facebook. So, of course, I would support your business if you start a business. So I often tell small business owners, get outside of social media. Don't do any of your polling on social media. Ask people who are most likely to be honest with you, because your friends and family, of course, want to support you, but most of the time they're not going to be your core customer base. So really asking those outside questions.
And this diagram here is from the design thinking model, where innovation really occurs, where those three elements intersect. Is there a market need, or is the solution you're providing desirable? Can it be built? Can I actually build this thing? And does it have financial viability? And where all three intersect within the realm of design thinking is where innovation occurs. All right, I'm going to skip ahead a couple of slides here just to get to these slides, because I think these are also important ones. We've mentioned some of these already. So these are a couple of questions to consider when you're seeking capital. How much money do I need? Well, that's a really important thing, but you'd be surprised when you talk to people who are new to business that they haven't really thought that through very well. So with the Everyday Entrepreneur Venture Fund that we're part of that I've mentioned before, we make our students come up with very explicit explanations of how they would utilize the funding if they were fortunate enough to get funded. And it has to be pretty detailed, as detailed as they can get it. Not, I'm going to just buy some stuff or something like that. It has to be very specific. And more importantly, that investment should be tied to some kind of growth in the business, some sort of revenue generation, something like that. So the more you can connect those things, those types of investments to revenue generation, the better off your financial request will be. We talked about this one. What type of business am I in? There's three broad categories of businesses. There are retail businesses, manufacturing businesses, and service businesses. All businesses fall into one of those three. So you have to know that, like which one am I in? And there's different financial requirements depending upon the type of business you're in. And then we spoke about earlier, am I a small to medium-sized enterprise business model or an innovation-driven enterprise? Are my personal finances in good shape? That matters less so when you're entering a pitch competition. They don't usually do a background check on you and ask for credit scores and things like that. But as you really approach people that are a bit more serious about investing in business in general, these do become considerations that if you're not able to manage your own personal finances, that can become somewhat of a barrier to accessing other people's money. It doesn't mean you can't, but it can be somewhat problematic. Now, within the community college space, many of our students do have some personal financial challenges. So we're fortunate to have different opportunities for students to be able to tap into funding regardless of those personal issues that they might be confronting, as long as the business model, the business idea is sound and well-formed. Do you know what your credit score is? You'd be surprised, a lot of people don't. They should, but a lot don't. Do I have any financial skin in the game? Have I put anything into this business? If you haven't, well then why should I put money into your business? If you put something in, if you bought something with your own money, if you borrowed money, gotten someone else to invest with you, a lot of angel investors won't invest in businesses that don't already have friends and family invested, because they know that if the business goes south and there are friends and family invested, the owners are much more likely to hustle to make the business survive because of their relatives than for that individual investor that might have given them money. What type of capital is most appropriate? Should I borrow money? Should I get some kind of equity financing if I'm able to? As I said earlier, equity financing is very difficult to tap into early on for most businesses. So most capital is individual money through bootstrapping or friends and family, and that could be in the form of borrowing as well. And then the last one, how much control do I need over this business? A lot of people, you see this on Shark Tank, which kind of creates this false narrative, but you see it a lot where sharks will make an offer for a business and it's way more than the entrepreneurs want to give up, but they don't have a business without the money. So we always tell students, what's better off, owning 100% of nothing or 30% of something, you know, where you're able to at least take it to the next level. So you have to kind of know where you fall on that pendulum. Okay, I'll skip over this. Well, do you want to talk about this, the advantages and disadvantages of?
Yeah, I think we should jump to let's talk about some of the numbers.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the financials that we ask. So we mentioned a couple of these already.
Yep.
I'll take the startup budget, and
Okay.
then if you want to take the other ones,
Sure.
that would be good. So a startup budget, I think, is the most important document for people new to business or even thinking about wanting to start a business. And it has 3 basic sections to it. The first section is, what are my one-time expenses that I think I need to incur to get the thing stood up? Do I need to form a legal business entity? Do I need to register a website domain? Is there any licensing that I need to get in place? Is there a logo I need to get designed? Like, what are those one-time expenses that I need to have in place to get started? Then you calculate what your projected monthly operating expenses would be, and you multiply that by some factor. I always tell students to use 6. So let's say your one-time expense, your one-time startup costs are $2,500, and your monthly operating expenses are $2,000. So you multiply $2,000 by 6 to get to $12,000. So you know you have at least 6 months of runway to pay your bills as best you could project over that 6-month period. So you would need $12,000 plus the $2,000 one-time expenses. $14,000 would be your startup budget. That's a really useful thing, at least in our classrooms, because oftentimes students have no idea how much money they need or think they need. And then it, of course, raises a reality flag. Like, your startup budget is $168,000. Where's that money coming from? Even if it's, let's assume it's accurate. And then they're like, oh gosh, I guess I have to change something in my business model, or I have to dial it back, or I have to do something else. So it can be a really useful instrument for us to use. And we really stress the startup budget a lot. It's often overlooked, but it's a great tool.
I think that numbers are the most important part of the business plan, because without numbers, you don't have a story, and you don't really know what the feasibility is, or how many customers you need, or how many widgets you need to sell to be successful. So the profit and loss or income statement really can help tell that story of that point in time where I can understand if my business is making money this month or this quarter or this year compared to last year, and how much and why. So it really tells a story. And the thing that I like about the profit and loss statement in conjunction with the startup budget is I can, one, see if I'm actually in line with what I projected, what my budget was, or I can say, oh, this thing happened where, you know, we had a manufacturing mishap or something else, and now I need to readjust and change my plan. So how do I do that and use the numbers that are in my profit and loss statement to really understand, okay, my gross profit is this, and now I have all of these expenses that I have to pay. So where does my net profit, and how does that help me understand, or loss, and how do I plan for the future? So if I made $5,000 gross and then my expenses were $5,500, do I have that extra money? Or how do I plan for the next month? How many more widgets do I need to sell, or customers do I need to have? So really understanding what those numbers mean. A lot of times with all 3 of these, I'll ask clients, who does your books? And they say either they're not doing books or their CPA's doing their books. But they don't necessarily look at their profit and loss statement or their balance sheet or their statement of cash flows, because they're not accountants, and the language can be confusing and intimidating. So really being able to walk through what those numbers mean and what story they tell. So yeah.
How do you respond when an entrepreneur says, well, I'm not going to be paying myself?
Oh, so it depends on the entrepreneur. It's ideal that they always pay themselves. That's not necessarily realistic for depending on the type of business. So if they're coming into starting a business and they can't afford not to pay themselves, which many can't, we advise them to not quit their day job until they've proven that they have a business model that will work, that people will pay for. Andy, jump in at any point if you want to add to this. But I mean, there's, and so, or if they're coming into it and let's say that they have a lot of savings and that this is a second career for them, starting a business. Well, then they may be able to afford to go even a year or two without taking an income, especially if they're doing a riskier business but might have a higher chance of reward. But if they're a typical Main Street business, like a physical therapist or a chiropractor or a dry cleaners, when they're doing that startup budget, they need to be planning to pay themselves. That's my approach. And so they can really understand, okay, I need to have 15 customers a day in order to be able to pay myself this, somewhat reasonable salary.
That's a really good question, Stuart, that you asked. And how we handle that is we make all of our students think about, before they start, how much money do I need to earn to do this as a full-time gig? Like, how much do I need to pay myself? What's realistic? And they struggle with that a little bit because they're mired in their own life right now. But let's say they come up with $120,000 is what they think they need to earn a year to be able to live the kind of life they want to live. So once you plug $10,000 a month in your operating expense piece of the startup budget, and then you're multiplying that by 6 to get to $70,000 right out of the gate, $60,000, $70,000, all of a sudden they're like, wait a second, I obviously can't pay myself $120,000 a year, so they start to back down from there. But ultimately they realize that if they want to do this full time, which is what we're striving for our students to do, we want them to think of themselves not as people that are just sort of dabbling in entrepreneurship, but people that will eventually have companies that employ people. You need to get paid a salary to do that. And if the business model can't support a salary like that, then you need to rethink the business idea. So that's kind of how we approach it. I will say the other thing about the profit and loss statement is it illustrates for anybody that's new to it that there's a huge difference between profit and cash. And I think oftentimes people get that one screwed up as well. So once you get to realize that just because you're profitable doesn't mean you have sufficient cash resources to meet your expenses, it makes people really focus in on the statement of cash flows in a more intentional and intensified way. This, for me, becomes the centerpiece for early stage entrepreneurs. They really need to be rigorous about this and understand this in great depth. Yes, sir.
What are I totally get what you're talking about, that the P&L doesn't always show what's eating up cash, but the cash flow does, because it's like a check register.
Yes.
What are the things usually that get stuck in the P&L that entrepreneurs don't realize that are sucking up cash, and you can literally show yourself being profitable and be insolvent?
Well, depending upon the type of business, if you're manufacturing something, for example, and in order for you to generate sales, you have to extend terms. You have to give people 60 days to pay you. So I sell you these chairs, for $10,000 order. I can record a $10,000 revenue on my profit and loss statement, but at the end of the month, you haven't paid me. I don't have that money, and I've got to be prepared for that. So that's one example. It could be a manufacturing business that has to give payment terms to somebody else in order to get by. It could be a miscalculation of costs, or it could be shifts within the economy where there's certain costs that just all of a sudden increase significantly that you have no control over, whether it be fuel costs or labor costs or whatever the case might be there.
We see a lot of contractors who can, especially if they're working with, say, a governmental entity and they're working as a subcontractor, where there's that delay in when they've been promise the payment, they put it on the books, if they're accrual based, and then they're not receiving the payment until 6 months from now. So yeah, totally going back to cash flows too, but we see that a lot with our contractors.
Yes, sir.
Question around, what type of accounting will you use? Will you use cash-based or accrual? Because
Yeah.
that's something, at what point you go from cash-based to accrual? Because
Right.
the reverse also works when somebody gives you $25,000 up front, but you haven't earned it, and there's a 12-month period while there's a
Right.
liability because at some point they break the contract. So when do you move from cash-based accounting to accrual-based accounting as a startup?
What do you tell people? I think it's largely business dependent too,
Yeah.
because some businesses are more cash-based businesses, let's say hospitality, restaurants, for
Yeah.
example, where there's a lot more cash flowing into the business in real time. So I think it depends on the type of the business and what stage that business is at. So that's kind of how we approach it with the students.
And frankly, sometimes it just depends on where the year end is for the business, where they might be in that cycle and how it might impact their taxes too. So I always tell them to talk to their CPA in addition to asking those questions.
The balance sheet is also really important, but it's very difficult for people early on to even develop a functional balance sheet. So the balance sheet, I'm sure all of you know, is just a listing of the assets that a business owns, any liabilities that a business may have, and the equity or owner's equity in that business. So what that formula tells us, assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity, is a lot of good stuff. It tells us how a business finances its asset purchases. Does it borrow money to buy assets? Does it get investment or make investments into the business to purchase assets, or some combination of both? And there's a lot of tie-ins, of course, between these three in particular that are really critical things for students to understand the relationships between these financial statements.
And we're almost out of time.
All right, so yeah, we're basically out of time. I'm going to skip ahead here because I do want to just mention one thing that we're working on through NACCE, which is this. This is a really cool initiative with Intuit, the TurboTax company. We are working with them with a pilot program. We're in phase 1 right now with these community colleges here. We've developed and co-created a financial management curriculum that meets several need states. One, for the educator that wants to kind of get their head wrapped around financial management in a more meaningful way and kind of skips over that section because they're not that comfortable with it. We want them to feel empowered to really dive deeper into educating students about financial management. This is also geared toward people on the non-credit side that have SBDCs, incubators, and just want to have workshops. So we have a modular approach that covers these various topics that are listed here, from business budgeting, kind of 101, to personal finance. We found that by informing students about personal finance before business finance makes it much more relatable. So when people think about their own personal finances, it's easier for them to understand that. And then when they tie it into business finance, some things connect dots a lot quicker than they otherwise might. So this is a really cool initiative. We're going to be embarking upon phase 2 with Intuit and expanding this pilot program to other institutions as well. But it's been a really gratifying experience for us to be part of, and we've learned an awful lot about the challenges that students are facing to learn about this, as well as educators to facilitate the delivery of this education. So I think those were the highlights of what we had. Does anybody have any questions for us? Just going to scan around. Oh, there's a question.
How are you working with students on business planning?
In our program, we don't do any business planning. We do just business modeling. So we say there is a time and a place for a business plan. But business plans typically are documents that are compiled of a bunch of assumptions, unproven assumptions at that. And typically business plans, when they first meet connectivity with the real world, implode in many cases. So I'll just give you one quick example of a business plan story. So we had a student by the name of Jason who came through our program, and they have to pitch an idea on the first day of class. So he gets up there and he's like, "Hi, I'm Jason. I work for a small family-owned restaurant. I'm an assistant chef. And I've noticed that every time the head chef calls in sick, which isn't often, the kitchen falls into disarray because all of us are fighting for control of the kitchen. We want to be the man, and the customers are unhappy because we don't know how to make the dishes, and then the owner gets mad. So my business idea," he says, "is rent a chef. I'm going to start a web platform where small restaurant owners can go to and order a retired or semi-retired chef to professionally manage the kitchen for a couple of days until their head chef comes back." I heard this, I was like, wow, that is a solid plan. I like that a lot. So he went out to test his biggest assumption, which was that small restaurant owners had this problem. And he came back a week later, he had talked to 32 small family-owned restaurants, and all of them said, absolutely no way would we ever pay for that service. We would just deal with the couple of days. We wouldn't pay for that service. And he was a bit deflated. So I said, all right, do you want to kill the idea right now or move on to a different, because you've got the whole semester ahead of you. This was like the second week of class. And he says, well, I don't think it's large restaurants, but I'll go talk to them just to rule them out. So he goes to like Capitol Grill and Cheesecake Factory and those kinds of places. And he comes back the next week and he's volunteering to go first, and he's happy, and I'm surprised. So he gets up there and he's like, the same thing happened, except it was louder no's this time. Like, really, no, we would never use that. And he stops, his last stop was an Outback Steakhouse in Tampa, and he goes in there, and the assistant manager's there, and he introduces himself as an HCC student, talks about rent a chef. The assistant manager politely says, no way, Jason, would we ever use this? We got so many qualified people. But my sister owns her own catering company, and she doesn't do any of the food prep. You should probably call her, because if her head chef ever called in sick the day of a catered event, she might be in big trouble. So he called her. She was like, yes, I'll sign up right now. And he says, well, you can't. It's just a project for a class at HCC. But he learned through that had he written a business plan, rent a chef, it would have been compelling. But as soon as he would have tried to deploy it in the real world, it would have imploded. But he learned who his true customer was by actually getting out there and going through the business modeling process. I know we're way over time, so I'm going to stop right there. So thank you very much.